Some people are born to shine in life, to succeed and enjoy the company of many true friends. Others, like me, have nothing but the bare minimum to survive. I find myself in this small group, living like a parasite, merely existing and breathing. I never knew my father. Some photographs preserved his face inside a small chest. On Father's Day and special occasions, all my schoolmates would bring their fathers, and I was the only child who couldn't enjoy that comfort. My mother never spoke about him, waiting until I was old enough to tell me that he was just a junkie who died from a cocaine overdose. In adulthood, my life proceeded normally, like any other young person my age. I attended the local college, made some friends, and even got a girlfriend, so beautiful that I didn't deserve all the good moments in my life. Reality is as treacherous as a hamster in the eyes of a predatory cat. We know things aren't so good for those who tend to attract bad energy in their paths. It started like another early morning, waking up from an unpleasant dream, but it repeated dozens of times. I got support from my few friends while I was no longer sleeping normally, increasingly looking like a walking corpse, exhausted and tired. The therapist asked how my relationship was, and I replied that it was fine. My girlfriend was hopelessly in love with me and did everything to please me. The questions from the guy behind the desk went to other situations, but in none of them was I living a draining life, except for the dreams that woke me up screaming at dawn, and my mother appearing in my bed to ask what was happening while I controlled my words, embraced by sobs. In an organized house, with the cat sliding on a small pile of pillows, I watched my girlfriend's naked body, her attractive curves diving into the bathtub and picking up some shampoo with a mint scent. Majestically, listening to a small radio near the toothbrushes, the sounds of Nicolo. Her white arms began spreading other aromas into the water. Relaxed, she sank her body a bit, leaving only the area above her neck. Submerged, she lasted a few seconds until the water took shape like a monstrous mouth and began chewing her body, devouring the flesh while I could feel as if I were enjoying it all by her side, unable to do anything. Each fragmented piece of her physical structure was crushed and mixed with the liquid in the bathtub, which began to overflow. The feline appeared, licking what was left with a crimson tone. I found myself several times in recent days with my heartbeat hurting my chest, knees to my shoulders, holding tight to try and find comfort, after once again dreaming the same thing, always feeling as real as the night before. The advice, treatments, and medications weren't enough when finally the nightmare became real. My girlfriend wasn't feeling well with my situation. I never told her about the nightmares I was suffering. However, in that situation, I should have mentioned something. In a fun event like any other, Lacey, my partner, decided to venture with some friends to a deserted and forbidden beach due to the lack of safety. The news arrived when I was finally resting better, knowing how to deal with the misfortune. The message was direct and to the point, hitting the most painful region of my heart, when they said she was attacked by sharks and died while surfing with her friends. It's not easy to lose someone you truly love. On social media, it's very simple to put in mourning and pretend you really care, but when the feelings are real, it's not like that. I suffered for a long time, and amidst the private torment, something was taking space and flooding any kind of affliction I should have been going through, as strange events started happening in my life, starting with nightmares, the same way it happened months ago, repeating dozens of times and slowly torturing me until they became real. It took me a long time to realize the horrifying situation I was going through. It was all so evident, hitting me in the face with punches that I was too stupid to see until it happened to someone else close to me. My older brother, the pride of the family, serving in the U.S. Army in combat against terrorists. In the dream, we were having dinner at the table, Mom, my future stepfather, me, and my brother. Everything seemed normal until I looked in his direction and saw Matt, my brother, without a head. The red liquid jumping from his neck, and he was talking as if nothing had happened, and I was slowly sinking into the chair, living in my private panic. This nightmare repeated in recent days. It was the same thing, That dinner, happiness gathered, everyone enjoying and savoring the table full of delicious food. My brother garnering everyone's attention for being with us, painting all the food with his blood escaping from the hole in his neck, and everyone feeding on the liquid of his death. This lasted for a long time, hurting and wounding me each time as if it were the first, piercing every crumb of my feelings. Once again, I didn't tell anyone. I never wanted to be the local madman, but the news came, and we learned that Matt had been killed in a mission. Something hit his base, and his head exploded like a balloon. We only received a torso, and the coffin was sealed. The ceremony was quick, and the mantle of death hovered over our home. The more I endured the anxiety of the events, the more incidents increased. The most recent was with my drinking buddy, the guy I considered my best friend, that kind of person you know will be with you in the exact moments. In the nightmares, Kenny was in a park, feeding pigeons, sitting in a chair with his legs crossed, and the birds increasing to swallow the corn seeds. Kenny was serene and well-dressed, the place shone like paradise, and his hands were throwing more and more food to the pigeons. Soon, the beauty gained somber glimmers, and the atmosphere grew tense. The clouds darkened. My friend got up from the park bench, pulled up his shirt, showing the belly area, and his body, in a few minutes, turned red and started bleeding until he fell dead on the ground, and the pigeons began to afflict his body with their beaks tirelessly. I woke up immediately. After that, and the mental calculations no human being can control, something dominated my mind, tormenting me in all possible and inexplicable ways. In some of them, seeming like comedy fantasies, I saw my dachshund appearing in my dreams, crushed and ground, with blood dripping from his body. In the sickening normality of being, pieces of bone sprang from his skin, and the black tire marks on his body played with the causes of his death. This lasted much less than I expected. His loving tongue, licking my feet, seemed enough until reality was realized. My dog was run over, and I saw what was left of his physical structure, ground by the asphalt. The first time lasted months, the second weeks, and in the other occurrences, involving random people in my daily path, it lasted days, and now it was hours. I was ready enough when the news came that my friend Kenny had been brutally attacked after resisting a robbery in a park against some addicts and vagrants. Before the news that would leave me shattered, even more fragmented and psychologically unstable, in the last 2 days, I was already seeing him as a living dead ready to be delivered to fate, and the curse was confirmed in my night premonitions. After that, things were no longer the same. The torment and restlessness became a real hell. On TV, I saw dead people. In real life, on my path, bags of living meat ready to die. Their identities were replaced by a blank expression, just a white wall with drawings emerging in skeletal strokes. I increasingly saw the death of everyone, feeling like I was in a living cemetery, walking among the dead and talking to them as if I were part of it. The sleeping pills didn't last long because my body became resistant, and at the peak of degradation, I ended up sleeping, passing out for a few hours. An overdose, similar to my father's, penetrated what was left of me. I woke up and didn't want to believe what my eyes were witnessing. The room around me was impregnated with pulsating shadows, as if they were reflections of tormented souls. I looked at my hands and saw they were covered in blood. A muffled scream escaped my throat, but panic didn't allow me to move. In the mirror in front of me, my reflection seemed different. My image was distorted, as if reality itself was being undone. In place of my eyes, there were deep black holes, and my mouth contorted into a sinister smile that I didn't control. I tried to move, but it seemed I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. In the corner of the room, a shadowy figure materialized. It had the form of a man, but his face was covered by a dark hood. His eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and a malicious smile formed on his lips. "We finally meet," the figure whispered, his voice echoing in my mind. I tried to respond, but my voice wouldn't come out. The figure approached, his steps resounding like thunder in my ears. When he got close enough, I could smell the sulfur and decay emanating from him. You freed me with your nightmares, he continued. And now, your soul belongs to me. Despair took hold of me. I tried to scream, but my mouth was sealed. The figure extended his hand, and I felt excruciating pain in my chest, as if something were being ripped out of me. My body started to tremble uncontrolled. About a year ago, I was driving back home after a long day at work. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds, foretelling a storm. The winding mountain road was practically deserted, except for a few sporadic cars that crossed my path. Suddenly, a flash of light cut through the sky, briefly illuminating the landscape before everything went dark again. My heart raced, and my eyes focused on the wet asphalt ahead of me. But then, a treacherous curve appeared, and as I tried to avoid a fallen branch, I lost control of the car. The world spun. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the deafening sound of metal twisting and glass shattering. When I regained consciousness, I found myself floating above the accident scene. Below, my car was unrecognizable, a mass of crumpled metal. And there, among the wreckage, I saw my own body, motionless and bleeding. I should have been dead. But I wasn't. Not exactly. An invisible force began to pull me away from the scene, and soon I found myself inside a dark, endless tunnel. The walls of the tunnel pulsed as if made of living flesh, and the air was thick with a fetid smell of decay. As I floated through the tunnel, bright lights began to flash around me, revealing disfigured faces watching me with hollow eyes and open mouths and silent screams. I wanted to scream, but no sound came from my mouth. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in front of me. It was my mother, who had passed away 3 years ago. She reached out her hand to me, her eyes filled with a sadness I had never seen before. "Maria," she whispered, her voice echoing through the tunnel, "go back while you still can." Before I could respond, another presence made itself known. It was a tall man with pale skin and eyes as black as the night. He wore a dark cloak, and his very presence made the air around me chill. "She is ours," he said, in a voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. "Her soul belongs to this place now." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The man approached, his eyes burning with an intensity that made my head throb with pain. "You cannot escape," he whispered, his lips curling into a cruel smile. A cold chill ran through my body as I stared at the black-eyed man. Every step he took toward me seemed to echo in the pulsating tunnel, amplifying the terror that gripped me. The air grew denser and heavier, making it hard to breathe, as if being sucked into a vacuum. My mother remained by my side, the sadness in her eyes turning to desperation. "Maria, you must fight. Don't let him take you," she pleaded, her voice growing more urgent with each word. But how could I fight? I was floating, trapped in a body that didn't respond to my commands, surrounded by disfigured faces that seemed to want to devour me. The tall man drew even closer, his presence filling the tunnel with a palpable darkness. "She belongs to us," he repeated, his words sounding like a final decree. "This is your fate. Accept it." Suddenly, an invisible force yanked me backward with a violence that almost tore me apart. I was hurled to the end of the tunnel, where the darkness was absolute. For a moment, I thought I had been freed, but then I realized I was in an even more terrifying place. The ground beneath my feet was sticky and made a nauseating sound with every step I took. The darkness around me was broken only by small red lights that flickered and disappeared, as if they were eyes watching me. The disfigured faces continued to follow me, now closer and more detailed. Their open mouths and silent screams revealed sharp teeth and forked tongues, and their hollow eyes seemed to draw me into an endless abyss. I felt a cold hand grab my shoulder. I screamed, but again, no sound came from my mouth. I turned to face who was holding me and saw a face I knew well. It was my father, dead for 10 years. His eyes were hollow, and the skin of his face hung in strips, revealing rotting flesh and white bones. "Please, help me," I begged, knowing he couldn't hear me. "Maria, you need to find the light," he said, his voice weak and distant. "It's the only thing that can save you." Light. There was no light in this hellish place. But before I could ask more, my father vanished, dissolving into the darkness. I was alone again, surrounded by monsters and an overwhelming fear. I kept walking, each step more painful than the last. The ground seemed to cling to my feet, trying to trap me. The darkness around me began to pulse again, and the presence of the tall man returned. He was behind me, getting closer and closer. Desperate, I remembered my mother and father's words. The light. I needed to find the light. But where? I started to run, my feet moving automatically despite the weight I felt. The red dots around me began to multiply, their eyes fixed on me, and the disfigured faces seemed to draw nearer, their mouths whispering words I couldn't understand. Suddenly, I saw a small spark of light in the distance. I could hardly believe it. I ran towards it, ignoring the pain and fear. The light grew as I approached, until I finally reached a clearing in the tunnel. In the center, there was a figure shrouded in a white cloak, emanating a soft and welcoming light. The figure reached out to me, and without hesitation, I grabbed it with all my strength. The moment our fingers touched, I felt a wave of warmth and relief wash over me. The darkness around me began to dissipate, and the disfigured faces retreated, as if the light was burning them. "You cannot have her," the tall man shouted, his voice now full of anger and desperation. "She is ours." The luminous figure looked at him, and with a soft but firm voice, said, "She does not belong to you. Go back to where you came from." With one last cry of rage, the tall man disappeared into the darkness, taking with him all the horrors that had pursued me. The pulsating tunnel became a road of light, and the luminous figure guided me back, step by step, until I finally saw the exit. I emerged back at the accident scene. My body was still there, motionless among the wreckage. But this time, I knew what I needed to do. With one last look at the luminous figure, who was now smiling at me, I plunged back into my body. The pain was immediate and unbearable, but I was alive. I opened my eyes and saw the paramedics around me, working frantically to save me. The light that had guided me was now inside me, and I knew that despite everything, I had escaped something much worse than death. Recovering was a long and painful process, but I never forgot what I experienced in that dark tunnel. The tall man and the disfigured faces still haunt my dreams, but the luminous figure is always there to protect me.